Hello, and welcome to Italy Beyond the Guidebook, the podcast that explores the people, places, and stories that shaped Italy far beyond the pages of a typical travel guide. Your expert is Sarah Cater from Flow Easy, a licensed guide based in Florence. Before we begin, a quick thank you to our sponsor, Italy News Online. If you enjoy discovering the deeper stories behind Italy, from history and culture to food, politics, and travel, visit italynews.online for carefully curated news and features about Italy in English. It's a place for readers who want more than headlines, offering insight into the country's past and present. In this episode, we're stepping back to Renaissance Florence to talk about one of the most powerful and fascinating families in European history, the Medici. Bankers, political power brokers, patrons of the arts, and, at times, controversial rulers, the Medici family helped shape not only Florence, but the cultural identity of Italy itself. So who were they? How did they rise to power? And why does their legacy still matter today? So, Sarah, let's set the scene. What was Florence like in the early 13th century before the Medici family came to power?
Well, Florence was a very rich, vibrant, and industrious city. Its wealth was based on the cloth industry. So they've imported wool and they're processing it. So they're working it, they're washing it, they're dyeing it, and then they export this product. Migrant workers then start flocking to the city to work within all the trades which are emerging and flourishing. The Medici family being one of several families which are moving into Florence. These trades, industries, then form themselves into guilds, and there were 21 of them. So, for example, there's the Wool Guild, the Silk Guild, the Apothecary Guild. So there were 7 major guilds and 14 minor. The foreman of the guild was called a prior, and they held posts within the government. The Signoria was a council of 8 priors with their chairman, who was the gonfaloniere, or the standard bearer. There were members of the Medici family who were priors. Over a period of 50 years, in fact, 28 times a Medici was a prior. So they'd already ingratiated themselves into a Republican Florence.
Mhm.
As part of their civic pride, these guilds are financing some of the great building work and decoration throughout the city. For example, the cathedral, financed by the Wool Guild. The baptistry is being financed by the Import and Export Guild, the Calimala.
So, why was Florence such an important city in Italy?
Well, it's a wealthy, vibrant, industrious city because of all these trades. And so these merchants then realize that maybe lending their money is more lucrative, and they become the bankers to Europe. The Florentines will mint their own coin, a 24-carat gold coin in 1252, which becomes an international currency. Banking was an exchange. So banking was based on trust. So not everyone you could imagine was trustworthy. And in fact, several Florentine families, they go bankrupt when they start lending money for political reasons. So could be quite precarious.
Okay. So, Giovanni de' Medici, he was the first top bloke in the family then?
It was. Giovanni de' Medici is the one that really founds the first substantial bank in 1397, so a bank in Florence. And then he has branches in Rome, Naples, and Venice. He's also got 2 woolen factories. Then he meets a man with ambition. He meets a man called Baldassare Cossa, and he finances him. Cossa is made a cardinal and then Pope John the 23rd. Now, the Medici are bankers to the papacy. So this starts their rise into prominence, which we'll see doesn't always go down with other wealthy families. And often this is problematic for the family with assassination attempts. Some are fruitful. They'll also be exiled from the city on numerous occasions as well. Now, this is also at the great time of the Great Schism, so there are other popes. So our
Right.
Baldassare Cossa, Pope John the 23rd, is going to be deposed 5 years later. And so the Medici family will will lose the papal bank, but only for a little bit, for a brief time, because they become the papal bankers to then Martin V, who brings an end to the papal schism. Giovanni is a businessman, a papal banker who's holding positions as prior and a standard bearer.
So
He
he's
was
big
on the
cheese.
committee. Sorry, a big cheese. Yeah, they're ingratiating themselves and infiltrating themselves into the political system in Florence. He's on the committees called to judge competitions for the baptistry doors. He's participating in decisions regarding the financing of the construction of the first orphanage of Europe, the Spedale degli Innocenti. He's commissioning Donatello Michelozzo, the funerary monument to Baldassare Cossa, who's buried within the baptistry in Florence. He's also financing significantly the project for the San Lorenzo Church and commissions his favourite architect, Brunelleschi, the old sacristy, where he's buried with his wife today. The San
Well,
Lorenzo Church will become the parish church of the Medici family.
okay. And we'll be talking about Brunelleschi in the next episode, so we can find out a little bit more about him then. So they're bankers and they're standard bearers and the priori and etc. But how did they gain such political influence when technically Florence is a Republican city? How did that work?
Well, for this, we then moved to his son. We moved to Cosimo the Elder. Why is Cosimo the Elder considered the real architect of Medici power? And how does Cosimo rule Florence without officially becoming a prince or king? Well, he'd worked alongside his father within the family's banking and commercial interests and activities, and he increases the profits and the successes of the family. Like his father, also a prior, a standard bearer, he's a shrewd businessman. And then he starts lending money to acquire allegiance to the family. So he's building up a network of alliances within the government. He's the de facto leader without a title.
Mhm.
So that basically he is creating this secret government where he's putting friends and allies into positions of power.
Yeah. Serious bit of
With the
nepotism
banking
going on there then.
Exactly. And then they're continuing to open up branches of their bank in Europe, which is allowing a network of information to come into the city, and it spreads their name and influence because Florentine families are working for them.
Right, okay.
So they're using all of this information as really to their advantage. They also become friendly with another pope. So this time we've got Pope Eugenius, and Cosimo was able to secure the international conference of the Western and Orthodox churches in Florence, who's acting as a head of state. This brought in a lot of money personally for the family, but also for the Florentines as well. And on a side note, those of us that like a little aperitif after dinner, then we have the introduction to Vinsanto. Because according to legend, it was during the council that one word was pronounced for the first time that was destined to remain famous. Okay. So one day we have our Byzantine cardinal who was given a taste of a sweet wine, or vin preto as it was called at the time, who as soon as he drank it seems to have exclaimed, "But this is Santos," alluding to a similar raisin wine produced on the Greek island of Santorini. Those that heard him, however, thought that he meant, "Oh, this wine is so good. Well, it's holy." And so from then on, the name remained.
Well, that's fine by me. Don't mind a little bit of
Exactly.
Vincent. Santo at the end of my dinner. Okay,
Yeah.
so
S- Stick some Cantucci biscuits in it, and away you go.
yeah. Oh, yeah. I know. Lovely, lovely. Oh, anyway, getting distracted now. So so basically they've built their power base by being nice to lots of popes, lending money to the right people, and bringing in their mates. Basically, yeah, it's networking on a big scale. Um,
Yeah.
so they're there, they're basically in power now. Yeah. So how did
Apart from a
yeah.
little interlude where actually Cosmo the Elder is exiled because there is a war against Lucca, which starts costing lots of money. And
Mm,
so certain families who aren't particularly happy with the rise of the Medici family will then accuse Cosmo the Elder of treachery against Florence. And so he'll actually be exiled for a while. He's
okay.
fine. He's gone still with his head attached.
Yeah.
And so he
Well,
actually makes his way down to Venice. And what he brilliantly did was that he closed the Medici Bank in Florence. Now, Florence's wealth is based on trade, lending money, exchange. And of course, well, there's no bank. And so
mm.
the Florentines then decide to get rid of Cosmo's enemy, and they invite Cosmo back in.
So they
So
had
for
the
a little
only
interlude,
bank. So they had the only bank then.
not the only bank, but it was a substantial, large bank that was needed. Yeah.
Okay. I mean, interesting thing about, well, no, actually, I was going to go off on a little thing about money lending in Venice, but that's another thing entirely. So, okay, so they're there. He's in charge. They're basically running Florence. Now, what they're also known for is patronage of art, sculpture, architecture, etc., etc. How did this work? I mean, they didn't just do it for the love of a good picture.
No.
It would. How did they use it to build political loyalty?
Well, art was used to basically promote power,
Mhm,
and Cosimo will pay for the embellishment of a Republican city. So, for example, he commissions Donatello, Judith, and Holofernes. He commissions David. So these are all symbols of liberation, of defenders of the people. So
mhm,
he's using art to promote Florence, but because he's paid for it
yeah,
himself, obviously, it goes hand in hand. He Lots of his projects will also be with regards to the church. Monasteries, for example, San Marco, he's paying for the restructuring of San Marco. Within San Marco, he founds the first public library.
okay.
Why religious? Because at the end of the day, the Medici family, as many families in Florence, are lending money. They're lending money, they charge interest on that loan. Now, for the
Mm,
church, that's actually a sin, that's usury.
yeah.
So when we ask ourselves, why do they pay for these great religious works of art? Why are they, putting money towards a cathedral dome and baptistry doors? Well, because art is almost their salvation as well. When they get to the pearly gates at the end and somebody asks them, well, hang on a second, what are you doing here, you banker? They can reply, oh, yes, I was a banker, but, look what I did with the profits. Can I come in, please? If we
Mm,
think of one of the most famous Florentines, and today we know him as one of the greatest poets, Dante Alighieri, who's in the
mhm.
seventh circle of hell, but bankers.
Campus.
And they
Mm,
can't stop moving their hands because they did nothing in their lifetime to warrant their wealth. So this is another reason why they're paying for great religious works of art as well as political.
yeah.
God's on their side.
Yeah, exactly. Because and I will digress slightly into Venice now, because in Venice the bankers were the Jews
Yeah.
predominantly, and they they helped the trade keep going in Venice. And so it was very important. You cannot regard, and the reason that the Jews were the bankers is because the church had, on a date that I've now completely forgotten, turned around and said, "That's it, Christians, you are not to be bankers anymore." And so Venice were like, "Yes, all right, Jews, you can carry on, and we will let that happen. It's because we still need the money.
Yeah,
You're not allowed to charge interest." I think that was the point from the Catholic
yeah.
Church's point of view. And from there on, well, it all went a bit weird. But that maybe could be a future episode. Anyway, back to Florence and the Medicis. So we then have, moving on from Cosimo, we then have Lorenzo. Lorenzo the Magnificent. Why was he magnificent? Was he? Was he really?
Well, there's a lot of propagating and promoting of a Medici myth. Okay?
Mhm,
Because honestly, if we think about it really, the Florentines for centuries have been fighting to keep themselves a republic. And the Medici family are doing everything to bring an end to that republic as well.
yeah.
Even if we think of Michelangelo, Michelangelo is almost discovered by the Medici family, in particular Renzo the Magnificent in his sculpture garden. But Michelangelo believed in a republic. So when the Medici family get themselves exiled again, Michelangelo is actually working for a republic, building defensive walls, fortresses, so that they can't come back in again. There's sometimes, we talk about the Medici family, weren't they marvelous? But were the Florentines so happy with them?
Well, they kept
Well,
kicking them out, didn't they?
completely. We know that because, sorry?
They keep kicking them out, don't they? So they can't be that happy with them. It's not like they were
Exactly.
there the whole
Exactly.
time. Mm,
Exactly. But, they use their artists as political pawns as well. So, for example, they'll send Botticelli, Ghirlandaio, Perugino to Rome to paint the Sistine Chapel. They'll send Leonardo off to Milan. And again, by doing that, they're spreading their name
mm,
throughout Europe. So it's almost this promotion of themselves constantly. Lorenzo Magnificent, he was a poet, he was an avid art collector. Now, his grandfather, Cosmo the Elder, has been making all of this money, and Lorenzo is the man that starts spending the money. He's not interested in banking whatsoever. And in fact, several of their banking branches fail. So London, Bruges failed. Okay. He does marry politically for the first time. He's going to marry a lady called Clarice Orsini from a noble family in
okay.
Rome. And with that marriage, they also then put their foot in Rome. No coincidence that then his first son will become the first Medici Pope. And so they were very shrewd, although to begin with, it has to be said, Lorenzo was quite inexperienced, and this will actually lead to the death of his brother because um, he's trying to build a rapport with a pope, and relations break down because Lorenzo is going to oppose the Florentine troops helping a papal army engaged in the conquest of Imola and Faenza. And so,
Mhm,
in response, our Sixtus, our Pope, is going to appoint somebody that the Medici didn't particularly want as an Archbishop of Pisa. It was basically a relative of the Pazzi family who weren't the great friends of
yeah.
the Medici. And then
Okay.
later on, they're wanting him really to become the Archbishop of Florence. They're trying to do things to try and take control and wrest it away from the Medici family. And then we've got lots of conflicts of interest and lots of tensions and conflicts and tenuous alliances because um, the Pope will then ally themselves with Naples, the Milanese who are supporting Florence, their Duke dies, and so then they're in lots of trouble. And so this culminates in the Pazzi conspiracy of 1478, when Lorenzo and his brother Giuliano are kneeling in front of the main altar on Easter Sunday within the cathedral when this assassination attempt takes place. Giuliano will be killed outright. Lorenzo manages to hide within the sacristy.
Mhm.
Retribution does take place, though. The Florentines will hunt down the conspirators, and then they're hung from the Palazzo Vecchio. And you can see that the Florentines, you know, they weren't so worried that there was an assassination attempt. You know, these things happened, but it was because really it had happened within their cathedral and on Easter Sunday.
Mm.
And so, there is the Medici family at times are lucky.
So if
Lucky,
if they'd have tried to assassinate him in the marketplace, they might not have been so bothered. Is that what you're saying? But the fact there was a
maybe
holy
not.
day and in a
Yeah,
holy place, they're
yeah,
like, no, no, Patsies, that's just not good enough.
yeah, exactly. Yeah. Why Lorenzo is called Magnificent is what he does afterwards. Because then he makes his way down to Naples, and it manages to garner peace between the two cities, saving Florence in the meantime.
Okay.
So
So
although he starts off being a bit inexperienced, he kind of gets himself together. The shock of his brother being assassinated in the cathedral,
yeah,
he gets
keeps him.
himself to gear.
Yeah. Was he young then? Was he really young when he came to power? Is that why he was inexperienced, or was it just because he wasn't interested?
Because he wasn't bothered. He wasn't bothered. He was more interested in tournaments and festivities and art collecting and writing poetry. He wasn't, so interested in the business maybe of and therefore not so engaged in the political side.
Okay. So
Yeah.
he's made peace with Naples, and then all well and good, but
Yeah.
because the Italian wars
They
are raging, the Italian wars, the
well, the
different
Italian
kingdoms of
wars.
Italy.
Yeah,
Yeah,
but the Italian wars are going to come after his death, so a couple of years after his death. So he's managed to kind of stave off all of the problems.
right. And then it kicks off after he's died. Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah. Now, political and religious tension. This is my favourite man, whose name I always mispronounce, but we'll try and get it right this time. Savonarola, who would be known for the bonfire of the vanities. So there is a lot more to him, and he maybe might have just had a bad write-up, to be quite honest. Done a little bit of research on him recently. But yeah, so there were a lot of political and religious tensions, which basically were embodied in this Dominican friar, um, Savonarola. How did the Medicis deal with this? Were they pro him, against him, or?
Well, Lorenzo had invited him to Florence because he thought he was quite a good orator. Um, and when Lorenzo is dying, it's Savonarola who is reading the last rites to him. It's what happens afterwards that's the problem. Lorenzo the
Mm.
Magnificent dies. His son takes over. His name, unsurprisingly, Piero the Unfortunate, gives us some idea of what happens. And again, maybe a little bit inexperienced. He was somebody who was very arrogant. By this stage, he'd just think, oh yeah, it's a type of hereditary um, de facto head of government, and yeah, he gets himself into problems politically as well. Okay.
Mm.
And he goes off and tries to again negotiate peace terms, but fails and manages to give away Florentine territories. And so then the Florentines are like, well, off you go, mate. And so the family are exiled again. And this is
Oh.
when we have Savonarola, because he kind of talked about there are going to be problems arising. It was almost seen as some sort of prophet, as it were. And then he starts to, rally and speak against the conduct of the Medici family, against all of this pagan world that they've been promoting. We don't want any of that. We want to get back to Christianity. He's
Mhm.
preaching the end of the world, a return to morality. Um, and he's creates this climate of almost terror in the fact that the Florentines, "Oh, we've got to do everything he does because he's foreseen what's happening." And so that leads to this famous bonfire of the vanities, which takes place in the Piazza della Signoria, so the political heart of the city. But the problem is that maybe he gets a little bit too confident and he'll start criticizing the Pope. So then the Pope will
Mm.
excommunicate him, and then he's in trouble. Because if
Yeah.
he excommunicates, it means nobody needs to pay you back. And so the Florentines, whose money is based on trade and banking, think, oh. And so Savonarola also goes up in smoke in the same
Literally.
square,
Literally in his
literally.
case. Yeah. Unfortunate.
Obviously, he's
I do
tortured
feel a bit
first.
sorry for him. I do. I do feel a bit sorry for him. I have to say, but you know, it it was a sad state of affairs. So Savonarola's gone up in smoke, just like all the art and the books and whatever that he'd preached against. The Medici, are they now brought back, or did they send him up in smoke?
Now, the Medici have been exiled.
So they're
Medici
still
are
in exile.
exiled. Piero the Unfortunate, he's still unfortunate. He drowns, dies.
I know it's
But
unfortunate.
exactly. His younger brother, not quite so unfortunate. He's working away in Rome, and he'll manage to get himself um, announced as Pope Leo X.
Yeah.
So Medici
Right.
family, yeah. So the Medici family as popes can then return to the city of Florence. Yeah, and this is when things start to change because then again we've got a Pope Leo X, then his cousin becomes Pope Clement VII, and then it's Pope Clement VII who's going to put his illegitimate son in charge, Alessandro, and Alessandro's going to be given a title of Duke. So this is when they start to get their princely title. Yeah.
Isn't Alessandro the mixed race one?
No, that was because Cosimo the Elder. Yeah, the problem with the Medici family is that they've all got
We've
the
all got the
same
same
name.
name.
Exactly. But Cosimo the Elder, yeah, he'd had a son with a slave. And there's actually a portrait of him within the Uffizi, and you can see that he's got darker skin tone. Yeah,
Yeah. Right. Well, there you go. Yeah. Wait. That's why they have to have their little monikers of unfortunate and elder and magnifico.
exactly. The
Okay.
Gouty.
So we've got the popes there. They're putting the family back in. Good old nepotism back again. So how do they? Because we know that some of the Medici, like Catherine, end up in France. So how do they do they do this all through political marriages to stabilize their power?
Yeah, I mean, Lorenzo the Magnificent is the first that marries politically. So he's going to marry the Clarice Orsini from that noble family in Rome. And then they continue to do this. And so, we have two French queens that come from the family, Caterina di Medici, Marie di Medici. We already know that banking can be quite precarious, and this is why the Medici family also realised that maybe putting some of their members within a wealthy church is also going to help because, one, they're going to be absolved of all of their sins.
Mm. Okay.
And so
I'm just
also, the popes, for example, Pope Leo X, again, he started very genial and he said, I've been given the papacy, so let's enjoy myself. So he starts spending loads of money. He's a great patron as well.
Mhm.
He started to spend money also again and on the San Lorenzo church in Florence.
So just thinking, if one of the things that we think about with the Vatican today is the fact that it's incredibly wealthy and it has its own bank, was it created by the Medici family or is it a completely different?
No, no,
All right.
no.
No
I
link. All
think that
right.
would be like a series of podcasts on that, I think.
What, the Vatican Bank? Yeah. Well,
Yeah,
yeah. And they're still being prosecuted. There's some cardinal or the other currently pretending that he hasn't done anything wrong with buildings in London and whatnot. Anyway,
yeah.
um, so they've bought absolution, the Medici family. Uh, what happened to them then? How did they get finally deposed?
You got the two popes, Pope Leo X, very good, apart from spending loads of money, and then we can blame him for selling of indulgences, kind of
Mm.
get out of hell
Out of
free
hell.
cards. And so that's
Yeah.
when you got the spread of Lutheranism. Yeah.
Hmm.
So, of course, he spent loads of money. So the papal coffers are empty. And so then when his cousin becomes charges, hasn't got any money left. And then this is where he's in the middle between this Holy Roman Emperor and the King of France, and he can't make up his mind. And then you've got the sack of Rome in 1527. So that's a Medici Pope. In the meantime, however, he's put Alessandro, his illegitimate son, as Duke in charge of Florence. But Alessandro is then going to be assassinated by his cousin. And so then with the assassination of Alessandro, that's the end of the first branch of the Medici family.
Uh,
And we arrive at the second branch, and we have Giovanni delle Bande Nere, who was fighting as a soldier for the Pope's army. And we have his son Cosimo the First, and Cosimo the First really is the pinnacle for the Medici family, in the fact that they get a princely title in the end. They get given the title Grand Dukes of Tuscany.
okay. So Cosimo the Elder is not Cosimo the First. It's a completely
Mm.
different thing. Um, and then we go from basically running Florence to becoming sort of dukes and then grand dukes of the whole of Tuscany, not just Florence. Okay.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
Mm, okay. So
exactly.
they
But again,
basically.
Cosimo the First is using money as well to kind of get in with popes, and popes is calling for the Jew. You were talking about Venice and Jews and
Mhm,
moneylenders. The Pope saying, "Well, I want them to have their own quarter." So, Cosimo creates a quarter for Jews. So he's doing all this to get that title, which eventually he does.
mhm,
Um, and when he dies, Florence is prosperous, is doing well. We then have his son, Francesco the First, who's somebody that's interested in science, alchemy, again, not really interested in the government. He'll die, and then his brother takes over, who's Ferdinand the First, and he's very good. Ferdinand the First, has, I think, many children. Basically, when he dies, he's leaving four sons. So the Medici
okay.
family, in terms of hereditary line, is secure, and also he'd done a lot in terms of um, successful uh, decisions in terms of political and financial achievements.
Okay.
He's also the man that is also introduces Galileo Galilei. He's
Mm.
given him a title of, or has given him a position in Pisa in the mathematics department, and also becomes a tutor to his son. Now, believe it or not, we have Cosmo II.
It's a bit like the
Well,
British royal
goes,
family, isn't it? It's like,
yeah, but from Ferdinand the First, and then from there, there's a decay, there's a decline. His son, Cosmo II, dies of tuberculosis when he's 30, so he's leaving his
yeah.
son, who's only 10 years old, and the regents are his mother and grandmother, who are devout Catholics. And so they're not really thinking of the economics of the city, they're more thinking of the faith and religion of their subjects. So again, this starts the decay, you got
Mhm.
plagues, etc. And and then it just continues until you've got three children left, basically. You've got Gran Principe Ferdinando, a lover of music, theatre, women, has a little trip down to Venice, catches something he shouldn't, arrivederci, no children. Second brother, Gian Gastoni, is quite depressive, and he's not interested in much apart from eating and sleeping a lot. No children come from him. And then the last member is Anna Maria Luisa. And although she'd had a good marriage, it wasn't in terms of she'd had no children either. So from three of them, that was it.
So, end of the line.
Yeah.
And so who replaced them then?
So the Lorraine family from Austria. Yeah, this had all. Yeah, the European powers had already decided that the Lorraine family from Austria, they were going to come in and they were going to be the new Grand Dukes. Florence was lucky actually because there were some very enlightened dukes.
Mm.
Yeah, but Anna
Mm.
Maria Gian Gastoni was the last, you know,
Grand Duke.
man to hold the title, and then Anna Maria Louisa was actually the last Medici member, and she died in 1743. Yeah.
Well, there we go. You see, it's a bit like the Habsburgs. Well, theirs was from inbreeding because the Habsburgs just married their blinking sister, cousin, aunt, whatever's. And
Well,
then,
so that's a little
but
bit for the
then
Medici.
they got
That's a
that
little bit
horrible
for the Medici
jaw.
family as well.
Uh, I mean, you
Yeah,
you
the
basically
one
become
thing
sterile.
I
Yeah.
I remember reading or listening to something, and they said the one thing that runs through the Medici family is that they were all ugly. They had these great big massive noses and big foreheads,
They did
and
have
they all
big.
suffered from gout. So they died early as well.
Ah, there you go. Yeah. So the Medici nose and the Habsburg chin. There we go.
Yeah,
This is what happens, isn't it? When you marry your cousin. So what
yeah.
parts, so we go to Florence today, what parts of the city still reflect the Medici influence particularly?
Everywhere. And so you have the Pitti Palace, which was their last home. You have the Palazzo Vecchio, which was frescoed from top to bottom when they moved in there. You obviously have the Uffizi, which were the government offices, administration offices, which now include many of their artwork, their paintings, and the Greek and Roman art that they collected. You have the Palazzo Medici Riccardi, which was one of their first big Renaissance palaces. San Lorenzo Church, which is their parish church. And then you also have the Medici chapels where you find the last members buried. So their legacy lives on.
Yeah, particularly in the Uffizi, I'd say, really.
Mm.
So do you think that the Renaissance would have happened without the Medicis in the same way? I mean, it would bound to have happened, but would it have happened in the same way, do you think?
That's a really, really difficult question because the Renaissance happened in many European countries, but at different times. You
Mm.
know, in different cities. For example, Venice comes a little bit later. So I think it would have done. I think it would have done. But they presided over it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So they might not have been the first, or
Yeah.
so influential. Because I mean, if you think about
Yeah.
it, if you think of Renaissance artists, you think of Michelangelo, you think of Da Vinci, you think of Donatello. Um, oh, and then somebody who I wrote an article about the other day, Fra Bartolomeo, um, like the forgotten Ninja Turtle, and he, yeah, they're basically they're all coming from Florence, aren't they? So
Yeah. I
would
mean,
they have been
I think
given?
the question I think the thing with the Renaissance, there are lots of factors with regards to it. Okay. And why does the Renaissance happen in Florence? Well, because it's a wealthy city. I mean, basically,
Mm,
they can afford it. Okay. A lot of it is religious, and we know why they are promoting and building and decorating religious buildings. Again, that's down to the wealth of the city.
mhm,
Um, and also, it's buried underneath their feet. This Greek and Roman world they've started to dig up.
yeah.
It's this kind of rebirth of, antiquity and not just the, physical world that they discover, but then they start looking back at the ancient philosophers, Plato, Aristotle. So it's all happening all at the same time. And there's not one thing. I don't think you could say, oh, it's just the Medici family. That's why we had the Renaissance. I don't think so. You
Mm.
know,
Yeah, didn't they open a Platonic something or the other?
yeah, Cosmo the Elder. So go right back to the beginning. He opens up the Platonic Academy in Florence. Yeah, he really
Yeah.
was one that was reading lots of literature and was interested in this humanism. Things.
Yeah, okay. So, visionary patrons, ruthless rulers, political operators, bankers. That's that's basically they were all of that, weren't they?
Exactly, all of the above.
All of the above.
Yeah,
So
and some
why?
were better than others.
Yes, well, yeah. Like old Mr. Unfortunate, he clearly was not one of the better ones, unlike Magnifico.
No,
So why is it purely because of the art that they remain the most talked about family, aside of maybe the Caesars from Italy?
I think also a lot of it has got to do with the last Medici member, Anna Maria Louisa,
Mm.
because as we know, the Lorraine family are coming in. And so what she brilliantly did was she wrote her will. And in her will, she left everything they owned to the Florentine state, stipulating within it that not one item could be removed from Florence.
Oh,
And so this is why their legacy lives on, because, Napoleon came, he takes a couple of things, a Venus from the first century BC, but the Florentines with the will because actually that's ours. And
yeah,
so everything you f- you go to Florence because the artwork is still the majority original and in its original position as well.
yeah. Which because
It's like
context
going back
is
in
a big
time,
thing, you know.
having, yeah,
Mm.
exactly. You're not going into, I don't know, you're not going into a museum to see a Perseus and then, a bronze statue and then having to be told where it was. You go into the square and there it
What
is.
it is. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. Context is definitely a big thing.
yeah.
Okay. Well, there's the Medicis for you. I think they're still. I mean, they're interesting. They're very interesting. And this was just a light touch.
Oh yeah. I mean, there's basically 200 years worth of intrigue before they get a title. And then
Yeah.
after that is interesting because then, they make silly mistakes or they've got the titles, they don't seem to be bothered anymore. And then you just get this decline and decay.
Mm. Yeah, well, I suppose it's that sort of rich, indolent lifestyle that comes of just having it there, I suppose, and that you don't feel necessarily in the next generations that you need to work to maintain it. You just enjoy it. Well, there we go. So
Exactly.
that's
Yeah. And plus,
that's the
and plus they, uh, yeah. And plus, I was going to say they closed the Medici Bank as well. They closed the Medici Bank, and then they're asking the Florentines paying taxes to pay for them as well. So
Mm,
you know, they're not having to fight and, work hard to keep that position because they've got it.
yeah, yeah. It's just the way it goes, isn't it? So that's the Medicis. And one of that we did mention him, Brunelleschi, he will be the subject of our next episode. Filippo Brunelleschi. So he's predominantly known for the dome on the Duomo, but but he's generally considered the founding father of Renaissance architecture. But there was a lot more to him as well. But you'll have to join us in the next episode to find out more about the man behind the dome. So if you've enjoyed this episode, don't forget to like, subscribe, share with family and friends. Down below, we have got links to Italy News Online, to Substack, where you will find more articles and little bijou podcasts. If you have any suggestions, comments, whatever, add them below. Suggestions for season 2, 3, and onwards. Also to Flow Easy, your website. So if you would like a guided tour, a bespoke tour even of Florence and Tuscany, then get in touch. And yeah, that's it. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you next time. Bye.
Bye.